The sliding doors of the crowded supermarket opened with a familiar hiss, letting in the scent of cleaning fluid and overripe bananas. James Sterling stepped inside his tall frame, moving with quiet confidence. Dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, he looked more like a boardroom executive than a man on a grocery run. In truth, he was both. But today, he was just a father. Next to him, holding tightly to his hand, was Mia, 6 years old petite. Her hair was tied into two neat braids. She clutched a well-loved plush bunny to her chest, her wide gray eyes scanning the busy aisles with visible unease. James leaned down and whispered softly, "We will be quick, okay?" Mia did not respond. She rarely did in unfamiliar places. Her shoulders were tight, her steps small and cautious. The store was buzzing with shoppers, beeping carts, crackling intercoms, loud music playing from the speakers overhead. It was a cacophony unbearable even for some adults. For Mia, it was a minefield. They had barely reached the produce section when it began. Mia's breathing quickened. She pulled back on James's hand, her grip on the bunny tightening. Her eyes darted toward the overhead lights, her lips parting in silent distress. Her little feet stepped back. Then again, she began to tremble. James crouched beside her, trying to block the surrounding noise with his body. "Mia," he said gently, "look at me. You're safe. Just breathe with me, sweetheart." But she could not hear him. Not really. Not in the way that mattered. Her eyes glazed with panic. Her breathing turned into shallow gasps. Her fingers began fluttering, her version of trying to cope. And then she froze. A low moan escaped her lips, the start of a meltdown James had fought so hard to prevent. A voice broke through the chaos. Not loud, not commanding, but soft and steady. "Hi there." A young woman in a green supermarket vest approached slowly. Her honey blonde hair was tied in a tidy bun, and her name tag read, "Chloe." She knelt down, careful not to crowd Mia, and spoke in a calm, measured tone. "It is okay. You are safe," she said, placing her hand gently over her own heart, then extending it outward in a simple sign. Then using slow gestures and soothing rhythm, she began guiding Mia through a breathing exercise. Hands up in, hands down out. Mia's trembling slowed. Her lips followed the rhythm, in out. Chloe continued, never taking her eyes off the girl, never once raising her voice. After a few long seconds, Mia's fingers stilled her gaze, locked on Chloe's hands. Then so softly, it could have been imagined, Mia whispered, "Safe." Chloe smiled. "Yes, safe." Mia reached forward and gently took Chloe's hand. James watched, stunned. His daughter had never done that with a stranger before, but the moment was broken. A man stormed over graying hair, red face, clipboard in hand. The store manager. "Chloe, what are you doing? This is not your job. You left your station." Chloe stood still, holding Mia's hand loosely. "She needed help," she said calmly. "I was trying to. You were trying to not do your job. I don't care what excuse you have. You are done. Turn in your badge." A hush fell over the nearby shoppers. James stood up, face unreadable. Chloe looked down. She unclipped her name tag, her hands trembling now. She bent to return it, lips pressed together. That was when James stepped forward. He pulled a card from his wallet, handed it to her, and spoke in a voice that silenced the entire aisle. "You do not work for them anymore," he said. He glanced at Mia, who still had her small hand wrapped around Chloe's fingers. Then he looked back at Chloe. "You work for me now." Gasps echoed around them. Chloe blinked, too stunned to reply. Mia, unaware of the commotion, leaned her head against Chloe's arm. And for the first time in a long time, James Sterling realized he had just seen something money could not buy. Someone who heard his daughter even when she said nothing at all. Chloe Evans had not expected to hear from him again. After the whirlwind at the supermarket, after the way his voice had cut through the noise, she went home, thinking maybe he had spoken in the heat of the moment. A wealthy father, grateful, reacting. She had been fired, yes, but people said things when emotions ran high. So when her phone rang the next morning and the name James Sterling appeared, Her first instinct was to freeze. Then cautiously, she answered, "I meant what I said." He told her, "I am offering you a job." "A job?" she repeated, still in disbelief. "A position?" "As Mia's personal support companion. Someone she can trust, someone to help her connect." Chloe's heart jumped. "I am not certified," she said quickly. "I took some classes, volunteered, but I am not a therapist." "I know that," James replied. "But what you have no program teaches." He paused. "You listened with your heart," he said, and she listened back. That afternoon, Chloe stood outside a tall black gate, hesitating before pressing the buzzer. The house was sleek but warm, softened by climbing vines and low golden light. A home that belonged to a man who once lived in silence until a little girl changed everything. The housekeeper welcomed her inside. James waited near the stairs in a navy sweater instead of a suit. Less CEO, more father. He nodded, though his gaze kept drifting down the hallway. "She's in her art room," he said. "She draws when she is unsure." Chloe followed him quietly until they reached a bright room at the end. On the floor, Mia sat cross-legged, facing away, scribbling with deep focus. Her plush bunny rested by her side. Chloe said nothing. She sat gently on the rug several feet away and pulled a pencil from her tote. She found blank paper on the table nearby and began to draw, not looking directly at the girl, a sun, a tree, a little figure with pigtails and a bunny. Mia did not respond. Chloe kept going. She added a girl with a green shirt and glittery shoes, then drew the same bunny again twice, before slowly sliding the paper across the floor. Mia paused. Then gradually, she turned her head. For the first time, she looked at Chloe, not through her, not past her, at her. There was no fear, no flinch, just quiet curiosity. Chloe smiled. "Hi," she whispered. Mia said nothing, but she also did not look away. The two of them remained in that sunlit room, Chloe sketching hearts, Mia drawing circles, speaking in shared silence. When it was time to leave, Chloe stood, collected her things, and thanked James gently before heading toward the door. Then she felt a tug on her sleeve. She turned. Mia stood there, holding her bunny, close, eyes wide and searching. One hand was stained with purple marker. She glanced at her father, tugged on his arm, and leaned close. "She's like Blue," Mia whispered, barely audible. James froze. He knelt beside her, stunned. "You said Blue." Mia nodded. "Blue, the color she used to hate. Too loud, too scary. She never described anything as blue unless she wanted it far away. And now it was a word of comfort." James turned toward Chloe. For once, there was no distance in his eyes, no calculation, just awe and gratitude. He said nothing. He only nodded. And in that moment, he knew. Chloe was not just the kind woman from the supermarket who calmed a child once. She was someone Mia had chosen, without pressure, without fear, and to James that meant more than any credential ever could. She had stepped into a world few dared to enter, not because she had to, but because she knew how. Through patience, through silence, through Blue. From that first quiet connection, something began to shift. Chloe started visiting Mia 3 times a week. The settings were always carefully chosen. Places without crowds or loud sounds, a bench under the trees at the park, a corner table in the library's children's section, a sunny room at home filled with pillows and an art easel. No strict routines, no pressure, just presence. Each time Chloe brought something simple, a new set of markers, a stack of paint chips, for the feelings color game, emotion cards, with drawn faces, happy, nervous, calm, stormy. She would sit beside Mia, or a few feet away, never forcing closeness. The girl set the pace. Some days Mia kept her distance. Other days, she quietly scooted closer. When Mia felt overwhelmed, Chloe used their color cards. Blue for calm, red for overstimulated, yellow for excited. Then she'd hold up her own, sharing how she felt too. It became their private language. Mia, once too afraid to use, even signs, started pointing, then nodding, then gently pressing her fingers to colors or sketching expressions in crayon. When she was brave, she made shapes in the air. A lopsided heart, two fingers pressed together, a swirl for confused. James watched from afar. He never interrupted, always nearby, with his laptop pretending to work, but his eyes stayed fixed on the two of them. His daughter was blooming cautiously, but steadily. He had not seen this light in her since Anna died, maybe ever. And Chloe. Chloe was the one holding the lantern. One Tuesday afternoon, Chloe arrived with storybooks tucked under her arm and a scarf Mia had left at the library. When she entered the house, she stopped. Something was different. Mia's art room, once bare and bright, had been transformed. The walls were now painted in calming tones: sage, green, sky blue, lavender. The same hues from Chloe's emotion cards. Floating shelves held framed pieces of Mia's art. Stick figures holding hands swirling scribbles in pastel tones, bold smudges titled Safe or Stormy. A new rug covered the floor, soft textured, chosen carefully for sensory comfort. But what caught Chloe's eye was the small wooden box on the center table, hand-carved her name on it in gentle script, Miss Chloe's Tools. She opened it slowly. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its pages labeled by weak new paintbrushes, a sensory squeeze ball, a child-sized pair of noise-canceling headphones, and 3 advanced books on emotional development for children with autism. The exact titles she'd once mentioned in passing to James. She hadn't thought he'd remembered, but clearly he had been listening to everything. She heard footsteps. James leaned against the doorway, watching quietly. Chloe blinked, overwhelmed. "You didn't have to," she began. "I know," he said, "but I wanted to." For a long moment, she stood holding the box like something fragile. Then gently, she placed it back and crossed to the wall where one of Mia's newer drawings hung. 3 figures, one tall with glasses, one small with a bunny, and one with long yellow hair. Mia peeked in from the hallway. Seeing Chloe, she ran in and took her hand. Then softly, she raised Chloe's arm and placed it over her own shoulder, her version of a hug. James stood in the doorway, heart full, not with grief, but with something closer to hope. For the first time in years, it felt like this house wasn't full of silence anymore. It was full of understanding. It was a quiet evening, the kind of quiet that only happens when a child is asleep and there are no more dishes to wash, no more emails to send, no more questions to answer. James sat on the couch, a steaming mug of tea in his hand. Chloe sat across from him, legs tucked beneath her, sipping her own. The lights were dimmed, the house wrapped in a kind of stillness that made truths easier to say. He had not planned to talk about Anna, but the silence made space for it. "She died the day Mia was born," James said quietly. Chloe looked up, her expression softening instantly. "There were complications," he continued. "Everything happened so fast. One minute I was holding her hand, the next I was holding a death certificate and a baby who wouldn't stop crying." Chloe didn't interrupt. She didn't offer sympathy. She simply listened. Really listened the way she always did. "I tried everything," James went on. "The best therapists, the most prestigious programs. I spent a fortune on experts who never even got Mia to look them in the eye." His voice grew tight. She would only draw. That was the only way she would speak. He stared into his tea like he could find answers in the steam. "I blamed myself. I buried myself in work, built a company out of grief. Told myself, if I just succeeded enough, made enough, fixed enough, it would mean I was still a good father." There was a long silence between them, filled with the weight of what he had carried alone. Then Chloe set her mug down, folded her hands in her lap, and said quietly, "My little brother has ADHD." James looked up. "He's brilliant, creative, funny, but growing up, he was a handful." She smiled faintly. "When our parents split, I became the only constant he had. I went to school with him, came home to cook for him, did homework with him, while working 2 part-time jobs." She exhaled. "There were days I wanted to fall apart, but I couldn't. I had to be the stable one, the strong one, because no one else was going to do it." James's eyes softened. Chloe glanced down, then looked up again, her voice quieter. "Now, I understand what it means to be forced to grow up too fast, to feel like you have to be perfect, when all you really want is for someone to say, 'It's okay, you're allowed to break.'" The words sat between them gently unspoken. After that, then came the night. It was around 2:00 a.m. when the silence was broken by a high, panicked cry. Mia's. Chloe, who had offered to stay overnight while James caught up on work, rushed down the hallway. She found Mia curled in her bed, clutching her bunny tears streaking her cheeks. "Shh," Chloe whispered, sitting beside her. She didn't ask questions. She didn't try to reason. She simply wrapped her arms around the little girl and began to hum, low, steady. A lullaby with no words, just melody and warmth. Mia's sobs slowed. Her breathing eased. James, drawn by the noise, stopped outside the door. He stood in the hallway, watching through the small opening. He saw his daughter wrapped in safety. He saw Chloe rocking gently, her eyes closed, singing something older than language. His breath caught his eyes welled with tears he hadn't allowed himself in years. Chloe looked up and saw him there, frozen backlit by the hallway light, shoulders sagging like they carried a world. Without a word, she reached out and placed a hand gently on his arm. It was the smallest gesture, but it was also the first time anyone had reached into his grief and touched it without flinching. James didn't pull away. He closed his eyes. And for the first time since Anna died, he let someone be there when he wasn't strong. It was Chloe's idea. "There's a therapeutic art workshop this weekend," she said, handing James a flyer across the kitchen counter. "It's for kids on the spectrum. Might be good for Mia to express herself, be around others." James glanced at the paper, then looked at Mia, who sat at the dining table, head down over her sketchpad. He nodded. "Let's try it." The workshop was held in a cozy art center, filled with natural light. Tables were laid out with paints, crayons, and modeling clay. Volunteers moved gently, speaking softly, never forcing interaction. At first, Mia clung to Chloe's side, clutching her bunny tightly. "It's okay," Chloe whispered, crouching beside her. "We can just sit and watch." They took a seat at a corner table. Chloe picked up a brush, dipped it into pale blue paint, and began drawing slow swirls on paper. She said, "Nothing, just painted." Mia peeked sideways, then reached for a crayon. By the end of the session, Mia had drawn something new. 3 figures hand in hand. A tall man, a woman with yellow hair, and a little girl in a pink dress, all smiling. It was the first time Mia had drawn herself in pink, and the first time she had drawn the 3 of them together. When she showed the drawing to Chloe, her small hands were steady. She tapped each figure gently, one by one, her way of saying, "You, me, us." Chloe only nodded, her smile trembling slightly. She didn't trust herself to speak. That night, James and Chloe stood on the rooftop terrace of his penthouse, city lights stretching out below. Inside, Mia was asleep, the drawing tucked under her pillow. They leaned on the railing in quiet. "You didn't just help Mia," James said. "You helped me realize that silence isn't always empty. Sometimes it heals." Chloe turned, caught off guard by the rawness in his voice. She needed someone to meet her where she is, James continued, not pull her into a world she wasn't ready for. "You did that, and you never asked for anything." Chloe smiled faintly, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "She gave me more than I gave her." Silence settled again, this time peaceful. 2 nights later, James asked Chloe to take a drive with him. He didn't explain where they were going. They pulled up to a quiet cemetery, just as the sun dipped low. They walked slowly until he stopped at a modest stone. Anna Sterling, beloved wife and mother. James knelt, pulling a small frame from a canvas bag. Inside was Mia's drawing, laminated, preserved. He set it at the base of the headstone, adjusting it carefully. "I come here every month," he said softly. "To talk to her, tell her about Mia. I've never brought anyone else." Chloe stood silently beside him, unsure of what to say. "I think," he continued, still looking at the drawing, "if she were here, she'd be grateful you are." Chloe's throat tightened. "She was kind," James said, rising, soft-spoken, but fierce when it came to people she loved. He turned to face Chloe, voice lowering. "She would have seen you the way I do." The words weren't romantic, or pressured, just honest. Chloe didn't look away. Instead, she opened her bag and pulled out a charm. 3 small twine and bead circles interwoven. Mia and I made this last week, she said, placing it gently beside the frame. She said it was for someone who watches from the sky. James's eyes closed for a moment. When he opened them again, he didn't speak. He didn't need to, because Chloe already understood. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon. James, Chloe, and Mia were sitting on a bench in the park, each with a cone of ice cream in hand. Mia was unusually relaxed, swinging her legs as she licked at her chocolate mint scoop, her new favorite. Ever since Chloe introduced it, they were laughing. One of those rare, gentle moments when everything felt settled until a voice broke through the calm. James. He turned sharply, recognizing the voice before his eyes confirmed it. Eleanor Sterling. She stood a few feet away, her tailored coat immaculate, her expression unreadable. The last time he'd seen her was in a hospital room 6 years ago, when she screamed through tears and grief that his choices had killed her daughter. Mom. Mia's ice cream slipped from her hand. She looked up at James, confused by the tension that suddenly crackled in the air. James stood slowly, shielding Mia with his body, but saying nothing yet. Eleanor's gaze shifted past James, straight to Mia, then to Chloe. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I heard you were here, she said to James. It took me long enough to find you. James's voice was calm, careful. Why now? Eleanor exhaled. Because she's my granddaughter, and I want to know her. It's time. Before James could reply, Eleanor looked at Chloe, eyes narrowing. And who is this? She asked. Chloe stood, offering a polite but restrained smile. Chloe, I helped take care of Mia. Eleanor's tone sharpened each word, slicing the air. Help? What kind of help can a girl from a grocery store offer a child like her? Chloe froze. Mia stiffened beside her, gripping Chloe's hand tighter. James's jaw clenched. That's enough. Eleanor ignored him, her voice rising just enough for Mia to hear every word. She needs a real mother, not a supermarket waitress studying to be a teacher. Mia whimpered, pulling at her dress, her breathing shallow and uneven. Chloe immediately crouched down, cupping Mia's face. It's okay, honey. You're safe. We're here. But Mia was already spiraling, rocking, mumbling, overwhelmed by a storm of emotion she couldn't name. Chloe gently led her to the grass and sat with her humming, lowly hands moving in soft, familiar signs. Eleanor watched a flicker of something unreadable crossing her face. Later that evening, after Mia had calmed and gone to bed, James and Chloe sat in the kitchen, the silence heavy between them. She wants time with Mia, James finally said. Chloe nodded, though her eyes were clouded. She's her grandmother. You can't erase that. James looked tortured. But Mia barely knows her. And after today, she still deserves the chance to know her family, Chloe said softly. He sighed, leaning forward, resting his elbows on the table. I don't know what the right thing is. I don't want Mia to feel abandoned by anyone, but I also can't let anyone make her feel unsafe, even Eleanor. Chloe reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. Then you'll make the decision that keeps her heart whole. A few days later, James made his choice. He called Chloe to the garden behind the house, where Mia was playing quietly with finger paint. I've decided to let Eleanor spend time with Mia, he said. Chloe nodded slowly. Of course. I think they should have a few weeks together alone. James added, his voice lower now. Chloe's breath hitched, but she didn't argue. I understand, she said, then gently. If that's what's best for her, I'll step back. But I'm not going anywhere, James. I'll always be close, just not in the way she needs right now. Her words didn't sting. They settled into him like a balm, because there was no resentment, only love. As she turned to leave, Mia looked up and signed. You come back. Chloe bent down, brushing paint from Mia's nose, and signed back with a small smile. Always. The days felt quieter without Chloe. Mia no longer ran to the garden in the mornings. Her crayon stayed tucked away. The easel in the corner, once vibrant with color, now stood blank. Eleanor tried everything. Books, puzzles, even cookies from Anna's old recipe. But Mia stayed distant. No eye contact, no words, no smiles. Every night, Eleanor found her curled in bed, clutching the pink headband Chloe had embroidered with a tiny S. The first few nights, Eleanor tried to take it, thinking it was a crutch. But the way Mia let out a silent, panicked cry stopped her cold. One evening, Eleanor sat at the kitchen table staring at an untouched plate of mac and cheese. Across the room, Mia sat on the floor, gently rocking back and forth. Eleanor pressed her hands together and whispered, "She doesn't even see me." Chloe had returned to routine. She worked part-time at a learning center, resumed evening courses, and tried not very successfully not to think about Mia every day. But she failed. Every time she saw a child with light-up shoes, she thought of Mia. Every time she saw a pink crayon, her chest ached. So she wrote a letter, not for Mia, not to James, but to name what she couldn't shake. She folded it and gave it to James's assistant. That evening, James read it. "I didn't know what love was until a little girl held my hand without saying a word, and I knew I was already hers." He sat still for a long time, eyes on the city lights outside the window, heart full of something he couldn't name, longing, maybe hope. The next morning before sunrise, a knock came at his door. Eleanor stood there, coat on eyes, tired. Beside her, Mia silent, half asleep, her head resting on Eleanor's side. "She hasn't smiled in days," Eleanor said. "She doesn't speak, not even with her eyes." James dropped to one knee and pulled Mia into his arms. She didn't resist, didn't move, just rested her head against his shoulder, like a leaf clinging to glass. "I thought blood would be enough," Eleanor whispered. "But she doesn't need my name. She needs safety, and she only found that in one place behind them." The gate opened. Chloe. James had called her the night before, asking her to come. No explanation, just please. Eleanor turned and saw her. Chloe, hair pulled back, face unsure. She stood frozen at the edge of the porch. "She missed you," Eleanor said gently. Mia stirred. She opened her eyes, looked across the porch, and blinked. Then quietly, she slid down from James's arms, walked over to Chloe, and pressed her forehead to Chloe's knee. Chloe knelt down slowly. Mia raised her hands, fingers trembling, and signed, "Safe." Chloe's eyes filled. She signed back, "Always." Eleanor stepped down the porch steps, wiping her eyes. Her voice shook as she said, "I'm sorry for everything, and thank you for loving her the way she needs to be loved." James stepped beside Chloe, placing a steady hand on her back. No one said more. They didn't need to. That morning, the sun rose gently over the house. Mia sat between the two people who understood her best, nestled in the silence they all shared. And for the first time in weeks, she reached for a crayon. Blue. The rain was soft that afternoon, barely more than a mist. The sky wore a quiet gray, and the sidewalks glistened like memories. James parked the car in front of the same little ice cream shop where everything had unraveled months before. The doorbell chimed as they stepped in. Chloe, James, and Mia hand in hand. Mia, now a little taller, a little more expressive, wore her favorite denim jacket and sneakers with star patches. She immediately rushed to the window seat. She remembered where she once sat, holding Chloe's hand in silence. Chloe carried a small leather-bound book, worn at the edges. She waited until Mia had chosen her chocolate mint swirl before sliding into the booth beside her. James sat across, eyes full of something between gratitude and awe. "What's that?" Mia asked, pointing at the book. Chloe opened it, page by page, revealing drawings, each one a frozen moment in time. Crayon lines of hands reaching circles, representing people trees with oversized leaves. Some were messy, chaotic. Others were gentle, filled with soft colors and calm spaces. "These are your drawings," Chloe said, smiling. "All the ones I saved from the very beginning." Mia's fingers stopped at one picture. 3 figures, stick arms joined, standing beneath a blue sun. She traced each shape, her eyes wide. She turned to Chloe, then to James, and lifted her hands. "This is family, right?" Chloe's breath caught. She nodded, pulling Mia into a hug. "Yes," she whispered. "This is family." The moment stretched warm and unspoken. James cleared his throat. and reached into his coat pocket. He slid a small navy blue box onto the table. Chloe blinked. James. He didn't say a word. Instead, he opened the box. Inside was a delicate gold locket. Hanging from the chain was a simple charm. 3 interlocked fingers, curved in the exact shape of the sign for always. A symbol Chloe had once taught Mia during their first few weeks together. James looked at her, then raised his hands and signed, "Will you be our always?" Chloe covered her mouth, tears brimming, then reached for his hands with hers. "I already am," she signed back, smiling through the tears. Mia clapped completely, understanding in her own way, her laughter, like bells in the quiet rain. 1 year later, the sign above the small brick building read, "Safe Haven." Inside, sunlight poured through wide windows. The walls were painted in soft blues and greens, and shelves were filled with tactile toys, storybooks, and sensory tools. At the front desk, a hand-painted plaque read, "Love is not what you say, it's what you show." Chloe walked through the hallway, stopping to kneel beside a new child, sitting nervously by the door. With a calm smile, she signed, "Hello, Safe." And right beside her, proudly wearing her own little name tag, was Mia Sterling, assistant helper. Mia turned to the new child and mimicked Chloe's signs slowly and clearly. The boy smiled. James sat at the back of the room, arms folded, his eyes shining. He wore no tie today, just a soft gray sweater and a look of peace he hadn't known in years. Chloe caught his gaze. He gave her a small nod, the kind that meant, "Thank you, I love you, and we made it all at once." She returned it with a smile, because in a world that often spoke too fast and listened too little, they had found their rhythm not in grand declarations, but in quiet signs, in gentle hands, and in choosing each other every single day. But their journey didn't end there. 2 years later, under the shade of the old oak tree in the park where they first connected, James and Chloe stood before friends and family. Mia, wearing a dress of her favorite blue color, held the rings with a pride that beamed brighter than the sun. As Chloe walked down the aisle, she didn't just carry a bouquet. She carried the promise of a life built on patience and understanding. When James kissed his bride, Mia cheered the loudest, signing, "Family," to everyone who would look. Today, Safe Haven has expanded to 3 locations, helping hundreds of children find their voice in a noisy world. And every evening, in a home filled with laughter and colorful drawings, James, Chloe, and Mia sit together. They don't always need words to say, "I love you." Sometimes, a simple touch, a shared look, or a quiet sign is all the magic they need. Thank you for journeying with us through this story. Life often takes us on unexpected paths, and sometimes the most beautiful chapters are written after the hardest storms. I hope this story reminded you that you are seen, you are valued, and you are never truly alone. If this message touched your heart, please leave a like and share it with someone who might need a little hope today. I'd love to hear your voice in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a moment that changed everything? Don't forget to subscribe so we can continue sharing these moments together. Until next time, take care of yourself